Bare necessities, simple bare necessities. Hello there. Greetings and salutations. Hi! Can tell I've had too much caffeine today? That's all right. You know how in your refrigerator, my refrigerator, there's all this stuff, and it says sell by date or use by date. You open up the milk and you forget to check it, and it smells really bad. It's like, oh man, the milk went bad. You got to throw it out. I've encountered this for decades now, and people suffering from ignorance really believe that metaphysics, and I'm not talking about religion because I'm never interested in discussing that topic, things just like a jug of milk in the refrigerator. That's old stuff, man. That's thousands. I've heard this so many thousands of times over the decade. That's old stuff, man. It's like, get with the new, man. This is like the age of iPads and... Here's a fact, and this is not my opinion, okay? It's a fact. There is 100% no evolution, nor could there be, in metaphysics or ultimate truth. There cannot be. Because other than your microwave and your iPad and your Toyota vehicle and your Apple Watch and your fancy digital cameras and all that garbage, everything is exactly the same as it has ever been. As so far as Mother Nature is concerned, even 5,000 years is shorter than one of her flatulences. There's no such thing as an evolution in metaphysics. Ultimate truth is ultimate truth. This notion that that's old stuff is nonsense. Now, something that I use because the analogy is nearly perfect and I've used it in countless different videos is like the radio analogy. If they had radios back then, they would have used it. Instead, they used different analogies. They actually talked about the wheel. The wheel is kind of perfect. And of course, their wheels are different than our wheels. In the case of our wheels, the axle spins. In the case of something that's a chariot or a wagon, the axle is just a round shaft, and there's a wheel put on the end of it, and there's a little peg that keeps the wheel on the axle. But the actual axle doesn't move. It is the unmoved mover. And of course, we actually have two wheels, the wheel of heaven and the wheel of worldly beings. And of course, we actually have the radial spikes. And that is just, of course, like the rays of the sun. We have the solar absolute. And of course, when you take an ancient wheel off, you know, there's this hole in the middle. Kind of like human experiences. We have these holes in our eyes, our nose, our mouth, our ears, and various other orifices through which human beings experience everything. Every being comes into this life through an orifice, and we experience lights and sounds and tastes and all these other things. So it's kind of the radio analogy of theirs back in the day. But there's no evolution in metaphysics. Privately, for example, a mathematician does not bemuse on his own at home or soaking in the tub his own solution for the answer to 2 plus 2. 2 plus 2 is not up for dispute. This is a timeless fact. 2 plus 2 equals 4, right? So, I've encountered this so much, this notion that we have to reinvent the truth. And that's completely impossible. There is never an evolution in metaphysics. There's different ways of explaining one and the same thing because nothing is known except through the modality of the knower. What I see and what you see are one and the same thing as long as your eyeballs work, but we'll have different words and different means by which we, discuss something. By the way, also, too, this is the reason, one of the primary reasons, not the only reason, there are 1,000 reasons why I don't discuss religion, is that if assumed truth has a beginning in time, or it's centered around a person, it's like, there's no truth, everybody was just like, doomed to hell before grand heavenly Bada Bing, Guru Bada Bing came along. It's ridiculous. There was no truth until so-and-so, wrote down the holy book of the heavenly spaghetti monster. And it can't be true. Ultimate truth can never have a beginning in time, and it can never, ever be centered around a person. It's like, until he came along, This is a Tesla doll, by the way. Until he came along, there was no truth. Everybody was just like doomed to hell. We were just being reborn infinite times until the master came along. I mean, that's just such ridiculous poppycock. I forget one of the master stone carvers who made beautiful sculptures said that he did not create them. All he did was chip away the superfluous marble that the great sculpture was always there. It's not that he created anything, but except for this thing that unfortunately we have these ancient dead languages, and even the most profound metaphysics vis-a-vis Plotinus, Syrianus, Numenius, and the ancient Nicaeas, and the most ancient parts of the ancient Nicaeas are so incredibly, they're so incredibly archaic, and it's been a dead language now, and I translate ancient Pali, have been now for well over 20 years, is that, it just makes people's minds melt, and people don't want to take the time to, bury themselves completely into the understanding of what these things and these beings were talking about. And of course, all the thing they're doing is bringing forth what was always there. There's no such thing as, once again, an evolution of metaphysics. This means that ultimate truth is everlasting, eternal, and has not a beginning in time, and it can never be centered around an individual. Now, a certain individual might make it manifest and clear away the ignorance about, the fundamental nature of things, but that doesn't mean that that person made it spring into existence. They just made it more apparent by speaking and talking to and teaching others how to see things properly. My entire life I've been absolutely and fundamentally interested in cosmic mechanics, and I knew that metaphysics and cosmic mechanics have to be one thing. There's no difference between physics and metaphysics. These are just different heads of the same coinage. There's no such thing as physics or metaphysics. There's only the ultimate silver of the coinage, not a head or a tail. People are caught up in the convoluted natures of their own nomenclature, the vocabulary they have, the way they see things, the way they perceive things. And this is the nature of existential existence, and this is the reason why there's so much strife and suffering in the world. But one of the things that is held on to this fact, since nothing is known except in the modality of the knower, is Sophia perennis, meaning that there's this ultimate thread. By the way, the word sutta, or in Sanskrit the word sutra, means thread. There's a common thread that runs through all of these things, including religion. And religion is just secularized metaphysics. But that's not a good thing. But there is still a thread of truth within it. Anybody that actually rejects the entirety of a religion is, of course, being ignorant and hyperbolic. I reject it outright, not because there's not truth in it, but once you actually, stick your toes in there, you're going to get dirty. There is... the water in your toilet bowl is obviously water, but you don't drink out of it for a reason, right? Your dog does, but you don't. What is potential is not actual. Extracting out the truth from things is incredibly difficult, and life is short, and people don't want to dig to the truth. They want things to be simple. And if you can't actually paraphrase it in a sentence or two, or at least even if it's incredibly complicated, within a page or two, then you fundamentally don't understand it. Sophia perennis at its core, meaning the perennial philosophy of the common thread of truth. By the way, the thread of truth, so far as the sutta is concerned, is strung with the pearls of wisdom. So this is the true meaning of sutta or sutra in Sanskrit. The thread of the absolute or the divine upon which the pearls of wisdom are strung, because in the case of the thread of the absolute, it's like an invisible thread, or like the thread so fine that you really can't see it. But once you string the pearls of wisdom on it, then the thread becomes apparent, because now something has made it manifest. I mean, it was there in the analogy of like the finest silk that the ancients would talk about. You sit there and hold it, and unless you squinted your eyes or really close to it, you couldn't see it. Monistic metaphysics vis-a-vis Advaita Vedanta, the principal Upanishads, original Buddhism, And the term Buddhism is completely ridiculous. I mean, that term didn't even exist until roughly the 16th century. The only time Gautama called his teachings a name was Brahmayana, which means the path to the absolute. All of these, including the teachings of Plotinus, of Pythagoras, of Plato, Numenius, Syrianus, are monistic monism. They do not teach that there is a first cause or original sin. The Greeks define it clearly. However, it is convoluted because people don't have a philosophical primer within their head to understand the euristostias, i.e. tolma, i.e. ananke. But to explain it simply, and I've done this many countless times, talking about, what's the cause, and there is no cause. It's attribute, just like light and illumination. That which the good is also too that which the good does. Of course, the word does is rather hyperbolic, but this is the monistic metaphysics of monism. I don't know if you know what metaphysical monism is, but you can look it up, of Plotinus. And some of the best Greek translators who ever existed, A.H. Armstrong, he's far from the best, but he's right up there, top 5. The very best was Thomas Taylor. There's absolutely no indication from Thomas Taylor, even though him and his wife would converse back and forth to each other in Platonic and Aristotelian Greek. Most brilliant, easily the most prolific ancient Greek translator ever lived. There's absolutely no indication that he understood monistic metaphysics vis-a-vis Plotinus. His Plotinus translation is absolutely the best, however it is incomplete, even though he translated volume after volume after volume of Plato, Aristotle, Proclus, on and on and on and on and on. They don't have the primer. What I'm getting through to you, and I'm not slandering academicians, even though I could do that all day long, is they don't understand. They could be the best Greek translators in the world, for example, or the best Pali translators in the world, but they don't have it within them the primer of what is being said. You could teach a computer to optical character recognition a book, and it could repeat the book back to you in a synthesized voice, and it could remember every word and how many words and how many, but it doesn't understand any of it. These academicians are like that. And their translations are dry and dead because they don't believe it, they don't understand it, they don't have that primer within their head. And people fundamentally want understanding, It's not about reading books and translating. It's not. I'm never interested in just, I'm going to read it and fill my head with all this facts and information. Well, Plato said in Republic 509D. Who cares? None of that stuff matters. That's empirical knowledge. Empirical knowledge isn't important. Wisdom is important. Wisdom is the water in the seed that leads to transcendence. Empirical knowledge is like watering the dirt. It's like, well, you have no seed of wisdom. You're watering the dirt. And look at it. Look at my field. It's perfectly plowed and perfectly watered. Yeah, but you planted no seeds. Nothing's going to grow. That's how these academicians are. Debating these Buddhists for decades. It's like, well, what do you think the subjective nature of immortality is? They talk about immortality. Immortality of what, by what, and due to what? These soul-denying nihilists, they're so self-contradictory, so inherently entropic. They can't see the forest for the trees. They can't even understand that the garbage that is flapping out of their lips is nonsensical. I've encountered this so many times. For example, let's say, well, it says in the Nikayas, and it says it everywhere within the Nikayas, this is not the soul, that's not the soul, this is not the soul. And it says views about the soul are heresy. And the Pali of the word is micha diti. It's like all of this is true, but that's not a denial of the soul. They can't see the stupidity of their own lip flapping. They've never given thought or... This is where wisdom is so important. Without wisdom, you got nothing. But modern people, they really do think, well, that's just old stuff. It doesn't really apply. It's like the same ignorance that applied to human beings thousands and thousands, countless thousands of years, is the exact same ignorance as we have today. Your iPad and your iPhone and your digital cameras and all the rest of that garbage you are in no way different than, the leather sandal wearing person stacking up mud bricks in the ancient Sahara, 10,000, 20,000 years ago. Your desires, your ignorances, your fears. There is nothing new under the sun. There is no evolution of metaphysics. There could never be an evolution. This notion that it's like milk, that's old stuff, it's expired. There's no such thing in metaphysics. That's not my opinion, that's a fact. Anyway, I wanted to talk about this topic. I hope you didn't find it too dry and boring. Tell me wax poetically on minutia of metaphysics. That really was not minutia, but it's an incredibly important point that nobody seems to grasp. Heart goes out to the folks of Ukraine and Russia. I hope as few people, suffer injury as possible. All of that is just absolutely horrible. But I'm pretty sure you feel that way too, so why even mention it? I just wanted to still mention it anyway. Lux Veritas, and goodbye. By the way, I'm recovering from major sleep deprivation. I've been working to 6 o'clock in the morning every night for 2 weeks, and I just finally collapsed. Like yesterday, it's the day before yesterday. I just completely collapsed into a heap. It's so painful, actually. Yep. Thanks.